So here it sits. I haven't done anything to it in way too long. And really, there's not much excuse for it, but I haven't needed it either. The tarantula that is going in here was not big enough to justify a 20-gallon long yet. I haven't really had the motivation to work on it either. Now, why? Well, I started work on this project several years ago. Almost 4 or 5. I mean, the channel's biggest videos are from 5 years ago. So, as far away as that, but really, probably more like 4. I'll have to look at the footage and see. But shortly after moving into this house with the space for a full reptile and exotics room, and had it wired specifically for it, all my camera equipment got stolen. And then I did not have the means to film further production. And shortly into this project, and before the camera equipment got stolen, the memory card, the first chunk of video on this tank was recorded on, well, that got smashed. And the internal piece, I don't know if you've ever taken apart an SD card, but inside is this tiny little half an SD card. Only the front half is anything. The back half is all form factor anymore, so it fits in an SD card reader. And of course, this broken internal piece would not fit in an SD card reader in my laptop. But I saved it because I knew if I could find a way to read it, I could get the footage off of it. Well, I've done that now with this little guy here. And I'll probably throw a picture on screen right about now of the janky setup in which I was able to jam the core of the memory card into here, wedge it in place with a guitar pick so it would read, because it's a core, it's smaller than the whole SD card. I was able to get the old footage off of this. Now, before I do part 2, which is where we were at, right? It was time for part 2 of an epic 20-gallon long Lasiodora Parahybana Brazilian Salmon Pink Bird Eater tarantula enclosure. Before we got into part 2, I need to share part 1 with you guys. And I can do that now. So I'm going to edit that now because I have it. But I'm going to preface it because it's been years. And a lot of the people from the channel are gone. You know, back then, I mean, not a huge channel, but probably closing in on 10,000 subscribers at the time, if memory serves right, and it might be wrong. Now we're down to like closing in on 7,000 subscribers. And there are new subscribers to the channel that are not familiar with the old stuff. And a lot of the older subscribers are gone. I'm going to preface it in that this footage is 4 to 5 years old. And 4 to 5 years ago, cameras were not as good, especially at the level I could afford. I mean, sure, you could have tremendous footage 4 to 5 years ago with $3,000 to $4,000 worth of camera, and I certainly could not afford that at the time. I did not have an external microphone on the camera or a lavalier mic or anything, so it's just plain camera body audio. And I was not as good at editing back then. Fortunately, I'm editing it now, but when you're better at editing and video production, not that I'm all that good, you're also better at shooting the video, and so it's not well shot. But I have to share it with you guys because it needs to be a step-by-step on. If you want to build how this turns out, then, well, I need to share part 1. I need to get that to you guys. So today we need to edit that, get it up on the channel like I have been promising to do for years now, and follow through on it. So let's do that now. Alright, well, the audio for this old footage is, it's pretty well dead. It's so muted and so artifacted you can't hear it. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to do a voiceover. I haven't really done much of this. I've kind of made my own sound effects, but I'm going to do a voiceover because it's the only way I can kind of make this old footage work. So here I am, considerably fatter. Dear sweet Lord, was I fatter. But here I am behind a 20-gallon long. For those of you that do not know, a 20-gallon long is kind of an interesting breeder size of fish tank, but it's popular with those who don't breed too. It's about a foot wide. I do believe it's, oh God, I want to say 10 inches tall, but it is 30 inches long. Yeah, 30 inches long, because I have bought lids for them since then. So 30 inches long and about a foot wide. It's a really common juvenile beardy tank size as well. But this is a used tank, and so what I'm explaining right here is that I need to clean it and sterilize it. I'll have to do it again after the project, but really just to get working on it, and anytime you're dealing with adhesion, you really do need a clean surface. So now we're cleaning the tank, and I'm using a solution I have made of vinegar and water. It's a probably 20% vinegar and water solution, which is maybe even 10% stronger than you really need, but this tank is going to go quite a while before usage, as we've discussed. Little did I know we were going to go probably 4 years without using it. At the time, I think I was planning on 6 weeks, but I might have been a little bit overzealous with that estimate. And really, I was trying to do the project for display purposes, knowing it wasn't going to get used for quite some time. But making sure to clean the tank thoroughly, because invertebrates like tarantulas are very susceptible to toxins, enough so that people will put cedar around their house in order to keep spiders out. Now, for the second chunk of this video does have quite a few parts to it. We're going to talk about a couple of fish tank centerpieces. These ones are from PetSmart, and it's been so long, I don't even know that they sell these same ones anymore. They are fish tank safe, which means they're tarantula tank safe. The big thing with fish is they also absorb chemicals and stuff from their environment, being the water, and fish tank centerpieces have to not leach into the water. I've actually had issues with that in one of my tanks. So I have about a case of Great Stuff expanding foam. Now, that's actually the brand name. You can pick it up at Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, any of your local hardware stores, and it's pretty handy. Here you can see I'm struggling to make this can work, which does happen when it sits around and you've used part of the can. Something about the way it has a catalyst in it and it being exposed to air makes it harden. Sometimes, it plugs not only the nozzle, but it plugs the whole can, and the whole can can go bad. So eventually here, I end up having to switch cans. Not a big deal. This stuff is cheap. I think it's like $2-3 a can. By the time you're working on large projects for 9-10 inch diagonal leg span tarantulas, really an extra $3 into your budget is, it's ashtray money, for lack of a better term, because we're dealing with, each of these fish tank centerpieces is probably $20 to $25. The fish tank itself is $20. We're going to need acrylic for the lid. As you've already seen, I have the acrylic already. I've had it for years at this point, but back then, I had already bought the acrylic. Acrylic is stupid expensive, by the way. You'd think for it being a plastic, it would be cheaper. So this Great Stuff foam, it expands and it fills. It's made to fill in gaps in your house. Say you have like a hose, that punches out through your wall of your house. You got to fill that gap. Well, we're using it to fill up the centerpieces. Fish tank centerpieces, they are hollow so that your fish have places to hide. Especially like I have a couple Plecostomus that really do like to hide in different centerpieces or under rocks. They're more of a nocturnal fish. They want to hide in centerpieces like this. And for tarantulas, we don't really want that. We don't want them getting stuck inside the centerpiece. We also want to be able to view them. Obviously, they're a really cool pet. We also don't want feeders getting into the centerpiece and dying and rotting, and then we have a problem with mites. And mites will kill your tarantula, especially if they get around the eyes and the book lungs of your tarantula. They'll definitely kill it. So I'm using a paper towel here on top of an old, dirty, crappy tablecloth that I don't care about. I'm using it for craft purposes because the table is still pretty nice. So the tablecloth's protecting the table. Now that we filled both centerpieces with the Great Stuff expanding foam, you can see the one on the left I have cleaned up. I've used a Dremel tool to do this. Went ahead and used a kind of angular cutting head to smooth it out, because this Great Stuff foam, you can't really control how it expands. It expands kind of lumpy, and you know, you need to clean it up a bit. So better off using a tad bit more and removing it. Now I'm using a mask because there's going to be a lot of dust. There's going to be dust everywhere. So I'm using a bandana. You can see quite professional in my method. And then I'm going to just not use eye protection because I'm a genius. So also use some eye protection. I'd recommend, honestly, more of a goggle as the dust gets everywhere. Oh my God. But power tools, man, when it comes to cutting foam, it's all about the power tools. Particularly the Dremel tool is nice, and I can't recommend the two-bladed turkey carver enough for cutting large chunks of foam. So there you can see, with the Dremel tool, we've really cleaned up that one section right there. We've gotten rid of a lot of the lumps, and I've done it obviously on the left centerpiece without dulling my bit at all. Now, in this third section of the video, man, it's outrunning me here. This third section of the video, I've cleaned up the faces on all of the, we'll call it inlets into the centerpieces, and they have smooth foam, but that really is not very good looking. So we are going to take a can of silicone, a black silicone that's 100% food grade. Now, at the time, I know we were struggling quite a bit with finding good food grade tarantula safe silicones, and I still have half a case of it because I haven't been doing a lot of projects. So I don't have to worry about that anytime soon. But back then I was using EMI Supply 5005 in a black. It's 100% silicone. It is UV stable, which is great when you're lighting enclosures for fish or for tarantulas, but it's also waterproof. It's a great adhesive. It doesn't shrink is the big one. When silicones shrink, they crack. Now, if you've used one of these bottles ever, the nozzles plug, and you can see I'm using a wine corkscrew to remove the plug from the end of the, to remove the plug of dried silicone from the nozzle. Now, I had totally forgotten about that trick till I just watched this a second ago. Shows you I'm not completely stupid in 2012 or whenever this was filmed. And of course, I got the nitrile gloves because we're going to use our fingers. We're going to get in there and we're going to finger paint with some of this silicone. But to be honest, watching this old footage, it's quite painful. One, look at how heavy I am. Dear sweet Lord. Also, the audio that is there, you can't really hear it, but very dry, straightforward, not very animated, because I'm not super happy. And I'm not having a bunch of fun. Whereas now when I shoot videos, I'm having fun. So I'm really trying to portray how much fun I am having. Whereas back then, I was just kind of getting along. And so here, back to the video. Here I am squirting silicone onto a paper plate. And the reason I am doing that is I'm going to use my fingers to spread the silicone over the area that I need it. Because I don't want to cover the entire area in silicone. I just want to cover those bits of foam. The silicone in this case, if you've ever done artwork with glitter, you'll know exactly where I'm headed. I'm spreading the silicone over the foam bits and just the foam. We want to cover that up, make it look a bit more natural than shiny black silicone. So I'm going to use a wet hand and a dry hand, and with the wet hand, in this case my right hand, I am going to spread the silicone over the foam. Completely cover it so that you can't see any of that tan sticking through. Now, the reason I have a dry hand is because once I have this foam bit covered, we're going to take some of our substrate that we use in the tarantula tanks. I use a coconut husk fiber in my tarantula tanks, and I'm going to take some of it here, and I am going to sprinkle it over the silicone until it's completely covered, and then pack it in, just really pack it in there. It does make the silicone take probably twice as long to dry, but I assure you 4 years later these centerpieces are quite dry. I used to give everything about a week, but in this case it's had a few years, so we know it's dry. But we're going to take this bag of this coconut fiber substrate and just pack it in there. Now we're using our dry hand because obviously if I use the other hand, the coconut fiber is going to stick to my glove, and then we're creating a mess. And if you've ever cooked or like battered some chicken, if you've ever taken chicken, dipped it in egg whites and put it in the flour, you know if you don't use a wet hand and a dry hand, you basically create a mess. And that's it. So here we're packing this coconut fiber into the silicone, covering up the tan that is the foam, and we've now stopped any of our feeders or our tarantula from getting into the aquarium style centerpieces and created something that actually looks pretty good. So there's that old footage. It is awful. Not only is it just simply a tripod staring at me, which is what this is, and I still think is awful, because hearing your own voice and watching footage of you, I mean, it's like kryptonite. It completely is, you know, it's just the most unpleasant sensation is hearing your own voice, I think. But I hadn't seen that footage. Dear Lord, I can't believe I was that heavy. I had to be well over 200 pounds. At the time, I didn't actually own a scale, so I don't know how heavy I was. I clearly wasn't happy. I'm very just depressed looking, right? I'd say so. I mean, I'd say I was definitely depressed. Now, I'm not currently depressed, and I'm really happy with the improvements I've made in my life. This, however, is an unfinished project. It needs to happen. I'm going to start shooting part 2 right away. It's got to be better than part 1 was, as part 1 was not very good. There's a dead male black widow there. Since when does my basement have so many goddamn black widows in it? I found one when I was just redoing it. That you would know if I had gotten around to editing that footage. But here we are. Here's our centerpieces. These old aquarium centerpieces now need to be cleaned because they're filthy. But you can see I have plugged all of the holes with substrate and with foam, and we've done what we were doing years ago. It's time to get a move on and get going on this. But man, I didn't know how bad that footage was, and I didn't plan on shooting a second part of this, but I also didn't plan on stopping where I stopped, and then, shoot. It's a good thing we change and we grow and we evolve, because, whew, wow, that's a lot to take in and process. Alright guys, we're going to make part 2, we're going to make it better, and we're going to get it done, and we're going to make this as impressive in the video as it will end up being in actuality, as I still argue I make some of the best tarantula enclosures out there using some of my own techniques and some techniques I've stolen. And You know, it's all about proper R&D, and that means to rip off and duplicate. But I do R, D, and I in that I improve. But I need to show you guys how good of an enclosure I can make, because at this point I am embarrassed and I feel the need to correct it.